a
Yeah.
New York Times bestselling author and a Lowell Thomas Award-winning writer. I wrote a New York Times bestseller with Venus Williams, the tennis player, and I won a Lowell Thomas Award for my dog travel guidebook for National Geographic. I wrote their first dog travel guidebook. I am working on a memoir, which I've been working on for 20 years. Keeps getting longer and longer. And now I think I have another entry after deciding to enter this contest, which I'd never entered a writing contest before. So I dashed off something and, I'm going to go back and edit it. But now I think I have another chapter in the memoir, which I wasn't going to put in there. But the contest was to look at like a decision that you have made that was something you didn't do. So it's a path not taken. And for me, I'll just start reading. And the name of it is The Life I Would Have Outgrown. I met Russell in Pittsburgh in the late 1980s, back when I was a young sports writer covering everything from college basketball to the still new Arena Football League. He had just signed with the AFL's Pittsburgh Gladiators after not making the NFL's Atlanta Falcons roster. And the city buzzed about this tall, handsome, confident defensive back who moved like he still had something to prove. I wanted the exclusive, and in true rookie with something to prove fashion, I badgered him until he arrived from his home in Maryland. The minute we met, the connection was instant. We started dating quietly, slipping into an under-the-radar romance that felt both spontaneous and inevitable. Back then, Russell could hear me smile over the phone. He still can. It was one of his superpowers, the way he tuned into me, even long distance. When I left Pittsburgh for my next job in Dallas in 1989, we stayed connected with the kind of intensity only long-distance couples in their 20s can sustain. By the time I moved home to Los Angeles in 1991 to cover the Lakers, I thought he might be the man I'd eventually marry. But the truth was already beginning to show in small, almost throwaway moments. Long before Los Angeles, when I still lived in Pittsburgh, I told Russell I wanted to go to Cancun. He wouldn't go, no real reason, just no. So his eldest brother, Eric, whom I adored, went with me instead. Eric and I had a ball. I can still see Eric's face from a night at a limbo contest, laughing like a kid. He bent back under the stick with his arms stretched wide, the happiest I had ever seen him. And his family said so too, when they saw the photograph I captured. I knew then that I wanted to be a part of that family. What I didn't know then was that Russell's reluctance to travel, to try, to stretch into the unknown would eventually collide with the freedom I craved. A few years after Cancun, after my 2-year stint in Dallas, and now working in LA, Russell prepared to graduate from law school. I organized a celebratory trip to Bermuda because a friend, an editor at Sports Illustrated, had married there and raved about the locale. Russell and I tossed around the idea of getting married there too, in that dreamy, impulsive way couples do when they're in love but unsure of the details. My colleague connected me to the official who could arrange the paperwork. I tucked away the contact information, imagining a future I wasn't fully convinced I wanted. When the trip rolled around, the first warning sign came before either of us left the United States. During my layover, I called him to check in and casually asked if he had his passport. I didn't know I needed one, he said. I remember staring at the airport phone, stunned. Bermuda was not a domestic flight. He was about to leave his home and head to the airport without a passport for an international trip. I sprang into action. I called everyone I knew, including that wedding contact, and somehow, through pure force of will, got him cleared into Bermuda. Even at 29, I could already feel the imbalance. I was moving mountains. He was simply moving. Once we arrived, the differences grew sharper. Like most tourists, we rented scooters. Russell drove fast, recklessly so. He hit a bump, we went flying, skidded across the pavement. He popped up laughing because, as a former football player, he was accustomed to injury. I wasn't. My jacket torn, my elbow bruised. He barely registered my fear. I wanted comfort. I got, "You're fine." Still, I tucked these moments away, convincing myself this was just part of discovering each other. A year later, when the Lakers played the Washington Bullets, I was booked in a posh hotel in D.C., as I often did for comfort during those grueling 5 games and 7 nights East Coast swings. Russell came to see me between my work obligations, and we ordered room service together. I asked for guacamole, standard California girl behavior. He looked generally puzzled. "I don't eat guacamole," he said. "Why not?" I asked. "I've never had it." I stared at him, stunned in the same way I'd been during that airport phone call. It wasn't about the guacamole. It was about curiosity. It was about hunger for life, for experiences, for the new, the unfamiliar. I had been traveling the world for years by then. Before covering the Lakers, I had been the national college basketball and tennis writer for the Dallas Morning News, covering Wimbledon twice and vacationing solo in Paris, Florence, and Greece. My passport was not just a booklet, it was a promise. My life was growing bigger with every assignment, every flight, every taste of somewhere else. And here was a man I loved, who loved me back, who could hear me smile through a phone line, yet lived in a world bordered by comfort, caution, and routine. If ever there was a moment when clarity hit me like a door slamming shut, it was during that lunch. Back then, I mistook his steadiness for my future, instead of noticing how much I already was outgrowing the edges of our world. I didn't end things that afternoon, but the truth had already settled in. We were headed in different directions, and only one of us was willing to turn the wheel. There was another layer too, one I couldn't ignore even in my romantic haze. Russell was deeply rooted in Maryland, entwined with his family in a way that was beautiful, but also binding. I loved how close they were. I loved how they loved me. His mother, his brothers, his sister, they embraced me fully. But I could feel the expectation hovering, unspoken but unmistakable. If this became marriage, I would be the one to move, and not just geographically. During that period, while covering sports, I became friendly with George Solomon, then the sports editor of the Washington Post. George admired my work. He told me once, very candidly, that he would never hire me because married female sports writers didn't want to travel. Even as he said this with affection, I felt the sting. His assumption wasn't about me, it was about what marriage, particularly to a man like Russell, could mean for my future. Professional travel wasn't simply part of my job, it was part of my identity. And I could feel in my bones that the life waiting for me in Maryland would require shrinking myself, becoming smaller, choosing stillness over motion, choosing safety over curiosity, choosing a path that would never have led to Italy, where I eventually lived. A path that would never have led to working for national media outlets, to living in Italy, to Napa Valley, to reinvention, to the woman I ultimately became. Because here's the truth I didn't know yet at 29. Sometimes a path not taken isn't a lost dream, but a closed door that saves your future self. Russell and I never had a dramatic breakup. There were no slammed doors, no ultimatums, no betrayal. We simply drifted into the reality we had both been avoiding. The phone calls became less frequent, the visits more strained. The space between us, once electric, turned into something quiet, heavy, resigned. We stopped keeping up the charade. Even now, decades later, we're still friends. He is still confident, still charming, still the same man I once imagined a life with. He didn't grow in the ways that I did, and that's not a flaw. It's simply who he is. But I soared, I reinvented. I stepped into the world with hunger and audacity. I moved to Italy. I built a life that twisted and expanded in ways 29-year-old me could not have imagined. We looked extraordinary together, Russell and I, him at 6'5", muscular and carved from the years he spent playing football, and me at 6'1", model sleek, both chocolate brown with megawatt smiles. Strangers stopped us everywhere we went to tell us how gorgeous we were together. But beauty was never the point. Beauty could not carry a marriage. Beauty could not carry me into the life I was meant to live. Sometimes I imagine that alternate life, the one where I married him in Bermuda or settled in Maryland, becoming the wife of a lawyer who preferred familiar routines over adventure. I try to picture the version of me who would have chosen that path. She is kind, warm, loyal. She is loved by his family, but her world is small, her horizons low, her wings folded neatly at her sides, her cage doors shut. And every time I imagine her, I feel gratitude wash over me, because the path I took, the uncertain one, the risky one, the wide, unpaved one, led me to myself. And the road I'm on now has no end in sight.